We all know that feeling you suddenly need to get your head around something complex and, well, fast.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's prepping for a tricky conversation or just trying to make sense of something challenging you're going through.
Yeah, you're looking for a shortcut, basically.
Hmm.
A way to cut through all the noise and get right to the core of it.
Exactly. And that's what we do here on the Deep Dive. We take the sources you share with us, dig in deep, and pull out those key insights.
You know, the stuff that really matters.
So you can get up to speed quickly, but also, like, really thoroughly.
Think of it as your express lane to understanding. We're not just glancing at summaries.
No.
We dive into the material you provide, find those crucial bits of knowledge, and hopefully offer a fresh angle to help it all make sense.
So today, we're diving deep into a book many of you actually recommended. It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine.
Right.
Now, this isn't, some detached academic study of grief. Megan's a psychotherapist, a real advocate for people dealing with loss.
But what makes her perspective so, well, unique and valuable is that she's lived through profound grief herself, deeply personal experience.
Yeah, so she brings both that professional expertise and her own raw lived experience to the table. It's a powerful combination.
And that's the real heart of this source, I think. It just resonates with this authenticity that comes from actually living it, not just studying it.
Definitely.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to kind of distill the core messages from Megan's book for you. We're focusing particularly on how our culture often, well, gets grief wrong.
Misunderstands it.
Yeah, and to highlight some, more compassionate, more helpful ways to both experience grief and also support others who are grieving.
We want to give you a really solid grasp of these vital ideas, basically a shortcut, without you needing to spend hours reading the whole book yourself.
Okay, so right at the start, something that really jumped out at me was how Megan talks about her own initial view of grief, right, as a therapist.
Yeah, she had the training, the clinical background. She genuinely thought she understood it.
Absolutely. She had all the frameworks, the knowledge. But then as she describes it, her own devastating loss just completely shattered that understanding.
It revealed how inadequate and sometimes actually damaging our, societal view of grief often is.
And it seems like such a common theme for people grieving this feeling of being judged or even like ashamed of how they're coping.
Yeah, the book shares some really tough examples. People being told to just get over it.
Or stop talking about the person they lost.
Right, or just move on. It's like there's this invisible, really rigid timeline or some correct way to grieve that just doesn't match reality at all.
And what's striking is how universal that feeling is.
Yeah.
So many people, they mean well. They really do.
They want to help.
They want to help, exactly.
Mhm.
But they end up saying things that just completely undermine the person's reality. Those well-intentioned but really dismissive platitudes.
Like they wouldn't want you to be sad.
Or everything happens for a reason. Ugh.
Mm.
The book really unpacks how those comments can actually make things worse.
It really does. And it points to this deep need, as the book says, to sort of rehumanize grief.
Yeah.
Stop treating it like an illness or something broken that needs fixing. And instead, just recognize it as a completely natural, totally understandable human response to losing someone or something deeply important.
And that's the core message here, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it's okay, that you're not okay, gives us this perspective grounded in the raw, lived reality of intense grief, which is such a crucial difference from purely academic views or even clinical ones that might lack that, gut-level understanding.
As the author says, she herself felt a pain that words just couldn't touch.
And that honesty, that lack of filter, it really comes through. She talks about the world suddenly feeling coarse and cruel.
Yeah, and how everyday things, stuff you never thought twice about, suddenly become these sharp, painful symbols of your loss.
Even just seeing someone else going about their day, totally normal.
Can feel like a punch to the gut. Yeah.
And what's so validating, I think, is her saying so directly, your loss is exactly as bad as you think it is.
That cuts through so much.
It really does. It cuts through that societal pressure to downplay it or rationalize it. She's saying, no, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Something huge and terrible has happened.
And those awkward, sometimes really insensitive comments from others.
As hurtful as they are.
Yeah, they're sadly pretty common. It's not just you.
It really puts a spotlight on how fragile life is, doesn't it? How quickly things can just change forever.
Totally. And it feels like our culture just hasn't equipped us. We lack the language, the tools, the framework to really face that fragility.
That's such a critical point. We tend to avoid thinking about impermanence, right?
Definitely.
So when loss hits, and it inevitably does, we're just completely unprepared. The book really stresses how vital it is to accept that not every loss has some hidden lesson or a neat silver lining.
Sometimes it's just awful.
Sometimes loss is just loss.
Yeah.
And it's devastating, full stop.
And fundamentally, the book circles back to this unavoidable truth. If you love someone deeply, if you open your heart like that,
you're making yourself vulnerable.
Exactly. You're inherently vulnerable to the pain of maybe losing them. As she puts it so powerfully, loving each other means losing each other.
Okay, so moving on from that, the book really digs into why so many of those common comforting things people say just miss the mark completely.
Oh, yeah.
It introduces this really sharp idea, the second half of the sentence, the part that's unspoken but totally implied in those platitudes.
That was such a revelation for me. Like, you hear, at least you had her for as long as you did.
Seems nice, right?
Seems nice on the surface, but the unspoken part, the implied part is like, so stop feeling so bad already.
Precisely. The book shows so clearly how these seemingly harmless phrases carry this hidden judgment.
Yeah, an implication that how you're feeling right now is somehow wrong or too much.
Like there's an invisible should attached. You shouldn't be this sad or shouldn't feel it this intensely or for this long.
And suddenly it makes perfect sense why you might just, bristle or feel angry when you hear those things. Even if the person means well, what often lands is this dismissal of your pain. It minimizes what you're actually going through.
And the book offers a really important insight into why people say these things. It often comes from a genuine place.
They want to take the pain away.
They desperately want to take the pain away from someone they care about. But what they don't realize is that by trying to kind of erase the pain, they accidentally diminish the loss itself.
Right. So real comfort, the book argues, isn't about trying to magically fix it or make the pain vanish.
No.
It's about acknowledging it. Just seeing the person in their pain and validating that, yes, this is huge. This is real.
Exactly. It's about reflecting their reality back to them, not watering it down or sugarcoating it with, forced positivity.
True comfort is just acknowledging, wow, this is incredibly painful. It makes total sense that you feel this way.
Yeah, rather than searching for some angle to make it seem less awful than it is.
Okay, let's maybe zero in on some of those specific phrases. Everything happens for a reason. That's a huge one the book really tackles.
Oh, absolutely.
And it unpacks why that can bring up such strong reactions, often real anger in someone grieving.
It really can. Because the implication, often unintended, is that the loss was somehow necessary or even deserved.
Which feels incredibly insulting when you're already in so much pain.
Deeply invalidating. The idea that your suffering serves some grand purpose. It can feel like a slap in the face.
Right. And it often connects to similar ideas like, this will make you stronger.
Or, now you'll know what's truly important.
And the book points out the hidden judgment there, like you weren't strong enough or didn't value the right things before this happened.
Which is just a massive misunderstanding of life, isn't it? The book powerfully argues that you don't need tragedy to grow or find meaning.
No.
Plenty of people live rich, meaningful lives before loss, and they don't suddenly have these huge growth spurts because of grief.
And this leads to a really key distinction the book makes. Grief isn't about betterment. It's not about becoming a new, improved version of yourself.
It's about integration.
Integration, yeah. It's not about finding a positive spin or neatly putting it behind you.
No, it becomes part of who you are, part of your story, something you learn to carry, to live with, not something you just conquer and leave behind.
And there's also this human tendency the book mentions to kind of assign blame when tragedy strikes.
As a defense mechanism, almost.
Yeah, like a way to feel safer ourselves. If something awful happens, we look for reasons why it happened to that person.
So we can tell ourselves it won't happen to us if we just follow the rules or believe the right things.
Right. The examples like blaming victims of violence or saying natural disasters are karmic payback.
It's this deep-seated instinct, often unconscious, to impose order.
To try and make sense of a chaotic world. But the book argues that this mindset fuels the idea that pain and grief aren't like healthy or normal responses.
Which just piles more shame and judgment onto people who are already suffering so much.
The book also looks thoughtfully at the role of religion and what it calls the cult of positivity.
Yeah, how that shapes our cultural ideas about grief. It talks about this concept of a vending machine god,
Where prayer is kind of seen as a transaction, right? You put in prayers, you hope to get a specific outcome, survival, healing.
And the problem with that, as the book clearly shows, is if some people do seem to get the blessed outcome.
What does that imply about the ones who don't?
Exactly. It creates this really damaging, unhelpful, false hierarchy of the blessed and the damned.
It's awful when you think about it that way.
The book really emphasizes that faith, at its best, should be about love and compassion and just being there for each other through life's hard stuff.
Not about trying to control outcomes or judge who's worthy.
Right. It challenges that idea that faith is mainly a tool for changing circumstances.
And then there's just this huge pressure in our culture, isn't there? To always be positive, to keep up this illusion of control over everything, including our emotions.
Totally. The book talks about how sadness and grief get stigmatized.
Yeah.
They're seen as dark or negative.
Almost like a sign of personal failure, or like your mindset isn't developed enough.
And this relentless push for positivity, the book argues, often carries this subtle hidden blame.
How so?
Well, if you're not bouncing back quickly after a loss, it implies you're just not trying hard enough or you don't have the right attitude.
Which completely invalidates the reality of some losses, like sudden accidents, unexpected illnesses, things that are just chaotic and senseless.
There's no neat explanation, no easy positive takeaway sometimes.
And the book even mentions how some, New Age interpretations can feed into this, ideas that you're somehow responsible for your own suffering.
Yeah, like you're not in right alignment or you're holding on to negativity.
Ugh, it just layers more self-blame onto the grief.
And finally, the book critiques that pressure to just rise above suffering, to practice non-attachment, as if detaching emotionally is the ideal way to handle loss.
So with all these really flawed cultural models and often hurtful approaches, the book turns to the big question. How do we find a better way, a more compassionate, more helpful way to deal with grief?
Yeah, it really pushes back against that simple binary thinking.
Yeah.
You're either stuck in pain forever or you somehow triumph over it.
It's not that black and white.
Not at all. And what's so refreshing is the call to just face grief, to allow its reality to exist without needing to force it into some story of recovery or transformation.
So the new model isn't about fixing grief.
No. It's not about making it go away. It's about finding ways to kind of inhabit the pain, to make space for it in your life.
And a huge part of this new model is how we support each other, right?
Absolutely. It stresses the massive importance of just witnessing each other's pain.
Without jumping in to fix it.
Exactly. Without the advice, without trying to solve it. It's just offering genuine companionship, being present.
The book says our support systems, friends, family, even resources like this book are most helpful when they help people carry the weight of their reality.
Not when they try to solve something that's fundamentally unsolvable.
And for ourselves, it's about finding ways to keep our hearts open, even when it hurts, to not lose sight of love.
Yes. And it's about getting more comfortable with pain itself, letting it move through us without judging it or needing to explain it or blame someone for it.
And honoring all grief, big or small, without comparing.
Right. And realizing that when someone shares their own story of suffering, even if it feels invalidating sometimes, they're often just trying to connect, reaching out.
Ultimately, the book paints this picture of a better world, a more compassionate one.
Yeah, where we all acknowledge how temporary life is, and we commit to loving each other fully, knowing that loss is just part of the deal, part of being human.
It's about connecting more authentically because we share that vulnerability.
Okay, the book then gets very raw, very honest. It dives into the actual experience of living the immediate aftermath of loss.
It describes early grief as a state of annihilation. That's a strong word.
It is. It captures that feeling of being completely stunned, disconnected from everything familiar.
And the book says, in those first disorienting days, the best support is often just simple acknowledgement.
Yeah. Just having someone recognize the sheer size of your loss. The author's story about keeping ashes close really shows that deep inability to accept the finality of death.
It really drives home how death just infuses everything. Mundane details of life suddenly become agonizing.
A song, a smell, a casual comment.
Anything can become a trigger, a sharp reminder of what's gone.
And the sheer effort it takes to try and re-engage with the world after a major loss. The book calls it Herculean.
I believe it.
And it highlights how utterly exhausting even simple interactions can become. It really normalizes that need to pull back, to shrink your world for a while.
Needing more alone time is okay. It's self-preservation.
Exactly. And that feeling of being too sensitive when the world just feels harsh and loud.
Yeah.
The book validates that completely. It encourages you to just move towards anything that offers even a tiny bit of respite, creating those necessary breaks.
The book also touches on the awkwardness of, like, public discussions about your grief, especially after sudden or unusual losses.
Oh yes, those well-meaning but intrusive questions from acquaintances or even strangers.
It's uncomfortable.
Very. And the book strongly defends your right to privacy, your right to tell your story or not tell it, completely on your own terms.
And I loved this concept, the vomit metric.
Huh. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so intuitive.
Deciding when it's the right time for hard things, like removing a wedding ring or changing a child's room.
The idea is, if just thinking about it makes you feel physically ill,
then it's not the right time for you. Simple as that.
Exactly. There's no universal schedule for these grief milestones. The book stresses honoring your own needs and letting others in the family grieve differently too.
It also mentions that grief looks different in kids. It's a long process for them.
Right. And the need for open, age-appropriate talk about pain, death, grief, and love.
Navigating family disagreements about grief, that's tough too.
Very. The book advises choosing your battles, setting boundaries, protecting yourself when you're vulnerable.
And it acknowledges that sometimes you lose friends during grief.
Which is an added heartbreak.
But sometimes comfort comes from unexpected places, like strangers.
It happens. Grief really can rearrange your world.
Okay, then the book tackles something people really don't like talking about. Rage.
Anger and grief. Our culture is deeply uncomfortable with that.
Which is strange, right? Because it feels like such a natural reaction to the injustice of loss sometimes.
Absolutely. But it often feels taboo, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's not okay to be angry.
Okay, so shifting focus a bit, the book then offers practical ways to manage grief long term, and it makes this really key distinction.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to solve the pain of loss, because you can't, really. The goal is to reduce the suffering that piles on top of the pain.
That distinction between pain and suffering is so helpful. Pain is the unavoidable reality. Suffering is the extra stuff we could potentially change or manage.
Right, and the book suggests treating your grief like an ongoing experiment. Everyone's journey is unique.
You become like a researcher of your own experience, noticing what brings even tiny bits of relief or peace.
Tracking how different things, situations, people, places affect how you feel.
And it suggests practical tools, like making wellness lists versus worseness lists.
To consciously guide your actions and thoughts toward minimizing that suffering.
Yeah. The overall aim is finding moments of peace within the grief, reducing the suffering, and just tending to the underlying pain with kindness.
It's a powerful reminder that even small steps toward your own well-being matter a lot.
The conversation then moves into a really difficult area, grief and suicidality.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
It is. But the book handles it gently. It normalizes that feeling of just not wanting to wake up.
While making a clear difference between that and being actively suicidal.
A crucial distinction. And it stresses the danger of not talking about these feelings.
It acknowledges that even fleeting moments of not caring if you live or die can be, surprisingly, a normal part of intense grief.
And it pushes back hard against those unhelpful platitudes like, you have so much to live for, when someone is in deep pain.
Those just don't land.
Not at all. The book recommends having a proactive grief plan for tough dates or events.
Like anniversaries or holidays.
Exactly. And it validates the need to sometimes temporarily shut off grief when it's just too much, using distraction as a healthy, necessary coping strategy sometimes.
And this idea of self-kindness as self-care really comes through strongly here.
It's fundamental.
Right.
Recognizing your limits, letting yourself feel pain without judging yourself for it.
Trusting your instincts, saying yes to what helps, saying no to what doesn't.
And the book is honest about how hard self-kindness can be, especially in grief. We tend to be so harsh with ourselves.
Way harsher than we'd be with anyone else.
Totally. So kindness in grief might look like letting yourself sleep, or canceling plans without guilt, or turning back if something feels too overwhelming.
It's basically about not abandoning yourself when things are hardest.
Precisely.
This deep dive also really highlights the physical side of grief, which I think gets overlooked a lot.
Definitely. It's a full body, full mind experience. It has real biological, neurological effects.
Sleep problems are a big one, right? Too much sleep, not enough.
Very common. And that directly impacts how we process loss and cope. The book also mentions nightmares, recurring dreams.
All part of it.
And those weird mystery pains, heart palpitations, headaches, stomach aches.
Things you might not connect to grief right away.
Right. While you should always get things checked medically, The book acknowledges how powerfully the body can manifest stress, could even sort of inherit symptom.
Weight changes too, losing or gaining.
Also typical. And cognitive stuff, feeling disoriented, foggy, trouble concentrating, memory loss.
Forgetting things, being clumsy.
Yes. The book reassures you. You aren't going crazy. These changes are, unfortunately, normal in grief.
Even that feeling of lost time, like you can't account for your day.
Yeah, feeling unproductive. It reframes that as an awake sleep cycle. Your mind is doing crucial healing work, even if it doesn't feel like it.
And anxiety. That seems to ramp up too.
Hugely. The brain, having faced a real threat, the loss can go into hypervigilant mode. It starts imagining worst-case scenarios as a kind of survival instinct.
That makes sense.
It offers short-term tools like breathing, grounding, and longer-term things like building self-trust, consciously replacing disaster thoughts.
And it really challenges that whole you create your own reality idea, which can feel so blaming.
Absolutely. Instead, it suggests aiming for neutrality. That idea of, currently, I'm not safe, but I'm not in danger either. This moment is neutral.
Finding that middle ground.
Okay, then the deep dive takes this really interesting turn toward art and creative expression in grief.
Which might seem unexpected.
Maybe. But the book is careful. It doesn't say creativity is some magic healing bullet, especially not early on when just functioning is hard.
Right.
But it argues we often turn to creativity because our minds, our hearts, just need to express intense emotion. Pain, like love, needs a voice.
And art or storytelling can help us try to make sense of things that feel senseless.
Exactly. And it can be a way to bear witness to your own reality, especially when maybe the world doesn't want to hear it.
If you separate it from the need to fix things,
then it becomes an ally. It helps you withstand grief, maybe reduce the suffering around it.
It also mentions that creativity can deepen your connection to the person you lost.
Yeah, this idea that death changes a relationship, it doesn't have to end it. Writing, for example, lets you tell your story, have a dialogue, map your journey.
Just telling your truth on paper without apology.
There's power in that.
Yeah.
And it suggests exploring other things, too. Graphic novels, collage, found poetry.
Treating them like experiments.
Right. Not aiming to feel better instantly, but just seeing if something shifts, if you find a little breathing room.
The key is that your art is yours. It's a companion, not a cure.
Yeah. And that leads into thinking about grief as works in progress. Integration, not just getting better.
Creative stuff helps you see your life, your heart as they are now.
And the book uses this beautiful image, a softer loss over time, a settling of stones.
The heart heals like the earth after a fire, but the scars remain. You walk on the skin of ruins.
It talks about resilience not as bouncing back unchanged, but being transfigured, learning to hold the scars and joy together.
And it addresses that fear that getting better means the loss wasn't important.
Which isn't true. Things just get different, not better. You might even miss the rawness of early grief sometimes.
But the connection, the love doesn't fade.
No. Integration is moving forward with everything, what was, what might have been, what still is. Grief has its own timeline.
What's in your control is self-care, love, being present.
Integration, not erasure. That's the goal.
The idea of sovereignty in grief comes up then choosing your own path, despite all the outside noise and opinions.
So important. And referring back to those wellness lists can help define what integration actually looks like for you.
The book keeps circling back. Supporting the natural, messy process of grief helps it soften. Your main job is self-care, leaning into love, kindness, companionship.
And it acknowledges how hard it is dealing with well-meaning but unhelpful people. That smiley face cookie example.
Ugh. Being told to just smile.
It's a reminder. Your tragedy isn't contagious. And sometimes you need to gently educate others, not aiming for perfection, but maybe just better.
While also knowing when to save your energy and just ignore it.
Yeah, deciding who is worth that energy. The book notes the weirdness of advice based on totally unrelated experiences, the huge gap between assumptions and reality.
It wisely says, choose carefully who you educate, set boundaries, protect yourself. Grief often shakes up your social world anyway.
And it's okay to step away from arguments with people who just can't or won't understand.
Then the focus shifts to helping your helpers, rallying your support team.
Reframing grief not as a problem to solve, but an experience needing support. Trying to fix grief always backfires.
So true support is about love, witnessing, companionship.
Resisting that urge to advise, fix, or save. Just being present. Remember that quote. The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed.
powerful.
The book gives practical do's and don'ts. Remember, the grief is theirs. Avoid compliments on strength. Remind them you're there. Stay present. Don't push solutions unless asked. Ask for consent before advising.
And check in. See how things are actually landing. Be curious. Be responsive.
Right. Don't take low energy personally. Don't overwhelm. Realize they might not be able to teach you their grief language.
It's like leaning in and hanging back at the same time. Observe, respond, but don't demand their old selves.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, the final big concept we explored is the tribe of after.
That unexpected community of other grieving people, it can be a profound source of comfort.
A shared understanding.
A deep bond formed in that isolating landscape of grief. A fellowship that often lasts when others move on. The Bedouin's gazelle story illustrates that shared sorrow connection.
It's not a club anyone wants to join.
Of course not. But the book highlights the fierce love and understanding found there.
Finding people who just get it because they've been there too. Being truly heard and witnessed by them.
It's a unique and often essential kind of comfort.
And the book ends with this really powerful message. Love is the only thing that lasts.
Yeah, framing grief as this lifelong journey of bridging the gap between before and now.
And reminding us that while so much changes or fades, love endures. It connects past, present, future.
It asks a lot of us, especially in grief. It takes strength, self-compassion to carry its weight.
Love means you breathe in two countries, bridging past and present.
It's the raft that holds us when everything else feels like it's breaking apart. The final message is simple. Hold on to love.
The book really encourages finding that middle ground. Self-kindness, not seeing grief as a problem, allowing space to be broken.
Not trying to get back to your old self, but acknowledging the changes, wondering what survived. We really hope this deep dive has felt like companionship, offered some helpful ideas.
And it all comes back to that core truth, doesn't it? Hearts get broken in ways that can't always be fixed.
But love endures. It really does.
So just to quickly wrap up the key takeaways from It's Okay That You're Not Okay, we looked at those unhelpful cultural models of grief, the harm platitudes can cause.
The power of just witnessing pain, not fixing it. The absolute normalcy of intense grief reactions, emotional and physical.
We talked about self-kindness, creative expression, integration over getting better.
And that vital support found in a tribe of after.
For you listening, we really hope this deep dive gave you a solid but also accessible understanding, maybe some aha moments, maybe some validation for your own experiences or those of people you care about.
And we definitely encourage you to reflect on these ideas, maybe even check out Megan Devine's book itself for a deeper dive. It's powerful stuff.
And one final thought to leave you with. Grief can feel incredibly isolating, so personal. But that shared human experience of loving deeply and inevitably facing loss creates this incredibly powerful, even if invisible, connection between all of us.